we settle down? We are going to start our panel on African presidential foundations. I am delighted that Bridget Fury from Oppenheimer Horizons, who's the head of philanthropy there, and they deal with presidents and former presidents. So I couldn't have found a better person to chair a panel on African presidential foundations and how we can potentially position them in this world of philanthropy. So please join me in welcoming Bridget Fury.
Great. Thank you very much, Emmanuel, and thank you to everyone for turning up after lunch on a Friday, which I know is a challenge. I'm particularly pleased to be here this afternoon for a number of reasons, but two in particular. One is that Oppenheimer Philanthropies, which is the family office of some of the Oppenheimer family based here in South Africa, have been long-term philanthropists. I mean, someone mentioned yesterday that it's unusual for philanthropy in South Africa, or in Africa rather, to have gone beyond 1 or 2 generations, and we're in our 4th generation of.
In view of the checkered history of African leadership and all, but as the moderator said quite rightly, it's a new phenomenon. Former presidential foundations are new on the African philanthropy landscape, and it's a reflection of the emerging democratic stability in Africa. So I think there's a close relationship, some nexus between these new foundations by former presidents. Second observation is that because of the recency, presidential foundations may have clear objectives, but I think the pathways to achieving them are oftentimes blurred because of the dubious political context and uncertain funding sources. Dubious political context because, again, going back to our past politics, and I don't know if any of you is aware of any political dictator or an autocrat setting up a foundation. So even though this new generation of African leaders seem to be wanting to copy what Americans have been doing for years or decades, there's still uncertainty about the pathways. That's the second observation. My third observation before I talk about the full foundation relates to the funding these new African presidential foundations. And I think these foundations suffer from the myth of African presidents being rich. When I was invited by the former president of Ghana to do this, most of my friends said, "Oh, Daffour, you are lucky." I said, "Why?" "Well, you go to head the presidential foundation, you have no problem with money. You'll be going everywhere and you're getting all this money." But I can tell you, it's a myth, especially for those who lived honorable lives and dignified lives and just chose to be good leaders, not just to be grabbers. So again, as I say, not all former presidents of Africa may legitimately and credibly set up foundations for those foundations to be legitimate and credible. So we have to also look at the character and the style of leadership of presidents if you are thinking about foundations set up by these people. That's very important. Because again of the pervasive perception that African presidents are corrupt. And it still rubs off. I mean, as you go around and you want to ask for some kind of funding or money, the possible reaction will be, like, you're working for African president, you are looking for money. It's a recurrent problem. It's a recurrent problem. So, my fourth and final observation, therefore, is to ask the question whether these foundations can survive. can they be sustained? Particularly if they don't have endowments. And the issue of endowment has been raised several times since yesterday. And you see, on one hand, it seems like we want to copy what the Americans do. But you know that for the American president, 2 years before ending the tenure, they set up some organization, appoint people, it's an NGO. But the last 2 years, that foundation is enriched by all kinds of things I don't know. And before they are out, the book contract is signed, they get millions and they all are channeled to the foundation. And after office, one speech somewhere can be 500,000, 800,000 per speech. And all of these contribute to the financial strength of American Presidential Foundation. So let us know the difference. So therefore, I'm not sure whether the template of the Americans will be what will work for us here in Africa. And then also yesterday we learned of the what we call the high network individuals in Africa who are doing great in the area of philanthropy. So we are here because Agyeman-Duah sponsored us, an individual with wealth. We know of Dangote with wealth. These are not former presidents. And of course, Ibrahim, who even decided to give 200,000 plus 5 million for any president who will leave office peacefully. Then we have Tony Elumelu, who is also doing a great job. These are all wealthy people by dint of hard work. They are the new African capitalists. So if you have something against capitalism, the fact is that these are the people who have entered the space of philanthropy in Africa. And they are what they are doing because they created wealth. So again, I believe that wealth creation is an important issue that we need to confront as we also get into philanthropy in Africa. So because of some of these reasons I've raised, in my view and from where I'm coming, Ghana, I think the Presidential Foundation in Africa have very modest agenda. We cannot do what Agyeman-Duah will do. We can't do what Dangote or Lumelu or Ibrahim will do. Because the foundations may be more than community foundations, but certainly less than the high network individuals. So that's where we are. So these were just some initial observations I wanted to make before presenting to you the John A. Kufuor Foundation. And I'll try to be on time. The foundation was founded by a former president, John Kufuor, who was head of state from 2001 to 2008, the first truly democratic president, because he took over from a gentleman who was in the military, ruled for about 11 years and decided to morph into civilian president. Either he manipulated the elections or not, that's not the issue. The issue is that General Rawlings became elected president, and he ruled again for 8 years as elected president. So the transition from General Rawlings to Kufuor was a very interesting one. But Kufuor came in, and I think the universal assessment is that he did very well. So after he left office, I think his reflection was that for all the years he has been in public life, and in fact, that gentleman entered public life at age 27, 28, when he left, finished law school in London and came back to the country. He served as a city council clerk in Kumasi, city senior officer. Then in '69, he became a deputy minister at age 29 or so, 30. The government was overthrown. He went into the hiatus, and then came back again when democracy was restored. Ghana has had 4 military coup d'etats. So for us, it's something we have lived with. But 92, when the new constitution was restored, I think there was new hope that that final republic, the fourth republic, will survive. And I think it's surviving very well. So after he left office, he told himself that for him, the biggest challenge to African progress, African development, is leadership. And that if we do not straighten up our leadership, Africa's problem might persist for a very long time. So his idea of founding the foundation is to kind of find a way to prepare young people for future leadership. So in simple terms, that's the vision for the foundation. So when I came in to be the CEO after retiring from the United Nations in 2013, the foundation had been registered, but it wasn't fully functional for all kinds of reasons. So we started to make it work. So the question I faced was, how do you achieve that vision? How do you prepare young people for leadership? And as you know, there are multiple templates for leadership training or leadership preparation. There are so many ways of preparing leaders, but we decided to focus on students. So we instituted what we call the Kufuor Scholars Program. We select students from all the Ghanaian universities competitively, and we keep them for 3 years and expose them to a variety of activities and experiences, including summer camp. Every year we have a 3-week leadership camp somewhere in the country. We have mini camps, we have seminars, we have mentoring programs and all. So just to make it short, because time is not on our side, let me quickly share with you just 3 areas that I think we are making some impact. The scholars themselves create projects for themselves. They create projects. One of them that has been so successful is what they call Sell Not Hell. I don't know how the scholars came up with this idea, Sell Not Hell. It was a simple, just to adapt a prison in the country and consistently work with the prisons to enhance educational facilities in the prison. So as I speak to you, the Kumasi Central Prison has a library, and this is something the students do. They raise funds and fix the place. Then also they do volunteer work and community projects that they have every year. They choose a community outside the cities and mobilize medical doctors and go and do a whole day health screening and many other things they do. Then interestingly, last year, when every year we have this student a leadership contest, the SRC, Students Representative Council. It is interesting to note that in the last elections across the campuses of the country, somehow the Kufuor scholars captured about 6 positions as SRC presidents across the country. That wasn't what we trained them to do, but somehow in the training and the orientation they are getting is enabling them at the moment to even begin to assume leadership at this time. Then another program I can also share with you is the Kufuor Young Entrepreneurs Network. Again, in the area of leadership, we are working with 20 young entrepreneurs, and I know the question of how young entrepreneurs get support came up earlier. We call them the KYE and PN, Kufuor Young Entrepreneurs Network. We provide them common platform for dialoguing and exchanging. We also try to give them access to finance, which is a major issue confronting them, and many other things that we do. These are the 2 flagship programs that the foundation is pursuing. And I have 2 minutes, and the final point I'll make is that because of the lack of resources, we are also doing funded projects. Currently, AGRA, we are working with AGRA funded projects in supporting farmers in farming communities, and also with support from the Melinda Gates and GIs, the German Development Corporation. We also do some work on rice, again in rice growing areas to support the country in becoming self-sustaining in the rice production. There are many other things I can share with you, but basically to conclude, I'm saying that former presidents can still contribute to their countries if, in fact, during their presidency, they live honorably and distinguish themselves as leaders. Thank you very much.
And say things that Daffour didn't say. And then I'm glad that people seem to be awake in this graveyard session. Thank you very much, Prof. and Bridget, for the kind invitation and the opportunity to share our thoughts on this important subject of philanthropy in the African continent, which we believe is an important aspect for Africa's renaissance. For it is not possible, in our view, to achieve the rebirth of Africa without harnessing the resources, human and material, that as Africans we possess. So, in this context, the presidential foundations have a particularly important role to play in that they occupy a unique position because of the various roles that have been played by some of their patrons before. I think, as Daffour has indicated, this phenomenon is not an old phenomenon. To that extent, many of the African countries are not having a consistent approach as to how to deal with their former heads of state. And some of the heads of state are provided with support in the form of pension. Others depend entirely on the support of their families. At best, some are forced to exile, and at worst, some are held into The Hague. So there's no universal approach in terms of how we deal with this. Unfortunately for me, I come from a foundation that has a patron who tried to live an honorable life whilst he was in office. And that gives an indication that the issue of capacity and the issue of funding is problematic. I got a call yesterday from one student at SOAS University in the UK saying, no, can we send them 695,000 rands from the foundation, because he's got this idea that this patron of ours is very rich. So Daffour, I agree with you. And it's so difficult to tell people that you are poor. Because I need to present a smiley face and a happy face, but really there's pain inside. But let's take this point, which I think is a very important point, and I think it's an important point for us as Africans to look at it. The use of the personae of our patrons as an example of African philanthropy is very important, because it's one indication of a commitment to service of humanity. For instance, our own patron spent almost 30 years in exile, sacrificing both his entirety of his youth and profession in the struggle for freedom, justice, and equality. I'm glad that I'm here so that all of us can answer the question honestly and truthfully, whether each of us can say, am I my brother or sister's keeper? And if we do so, we will not be joined in reciting Jeremiah's lamentation, where he says, look and see our disgrace. Our inheritance has been turned over to strangers, our homes for foreigners. We must buy water we drink. Our woods can be bought only at a great price. I dare say we must not be weary in terms of making sure that we work collectively for an Africa to be reborn, which is at peace with itself and prosperous for its children. Thank you very much for listening.
Bonjour. Voilà. Merci. You understand that I am the only Francophone here. I want to talk about Leopard Senghor Foundation, but before, I have to talk about Leopard Senghor himself. Senghor was born in 1906 and died in 2001. So his age was 95 years. And in 1945, he was elected as a deputy representative of Senegal at the National Assembly of France. And he will be a representative until 1960. He became the first president of Senegal during 20 years until December 1980, and then he left officially his function. So Senghor didn't want the creation of a foundation on his name. He wanted to create a foundation for Africa. But his friends tell him that it is necessary to have a foundation on his name. And the Foundation Leopard Senghor has been created in 1975. So it is now 45 years. And it was very important for him to support the Africa culture. The first objective of the foundation is to promote, to preserve and promote African cultural heritage. Two other goals are to enhance la formation, the training of personnel of universities, so that the Africanization of university has been done. And the next one is to promote the research on cultural African heritage. Senghor says somewhere that Africa has not speak, but Africa has a lot of things to say. And the last one is that promoting the cooperation with other organizations, with other foundation. And if you take all these elements, you have 3 words to express the objective of the foundation. First, culture. Second, development. And third, peace. Why Ethiopia? Senghor himself created this review and has written the first text on this review. He said that in 1975, most of the African countries were independent during 15 years, but they didn't have a framework to discuss about ideas. Or discussing about ideas is something very, very important. And the people, the deciders, the government need someone to discuss with everyone to see better what can be done. And Ethiopia is open to the University of Africa, Francophone search, but also part of the world too. And Ethiopia is a review, Negro-African review on literature, philosophy, anthropology, sociology, and arts. Donc, the framework is very, very large. And if you take a theme, you make an appeal for contribution, and you have the point of view, or the point of view of people in university generally, who can say you what is the question, the situation in view of literature, in sociology, in anthropology, in philosophy and arts. And this is very, very important for us. That's the reason why when we have Ethiopia, a new numero, it is sent to all the government of Senegal, and they read it because they don't have the time to make synthesis and so on. So we estimate that Foundation Senghor has helped, has given aids and so on for the research. We estimate now that is it time to make synthesis, global synthesis, so that we can know where we are in every point. You know, in 2013, the theme of the African Union was the African Renaissance.
So whether good, bad, or ugly, we should still learn the history of our past presidents. We shouldn't let them die. So this foundation should take that and champion that we have Nkrumah. Nkrumah is divided in Ghana, but on the African continent it's different. So we have to look at that. We have Mugabe, who I don't know where he is now. We need to study him and know why he did what he did, and whether given the opportunity, he would do something differently. Gaddafi, the list can go on. But my question is, what are we doing to preserve this uniqueness of African leaders, whether good, bad, or maybe ugly?
Certainly African dictators do get a bad press, but we must recognize their enormous contribution to the alleviation of the poverty of Swiss bankers. The practical question I have is that the African Union had organized two very important conferences, and my colleague Paul Saleza, we first met there in Brazil. This is the conference of African intellectuals in the diaspora. It really is a space that brings the exploration of ideology and thought within Africa and amongst the wider diaspora. This includes the Brazilian, North American and Asian diaspora. And from what I'm hearing of the work of the foundation, Leopard, Senghor, Mbeki, and new leadership, the Kufuor, I think it is really time for your foundations to connect with the AU to convene the third CIAD conference.
I'm also interested in the idea of the African intellectuals in diaspora and how we can connect with them. In fact, as I'm sitting here, I was telling my good friend here that we should begin to network. So far, these foundations are functioning in isolation. We all have our various objectives, and that's understandable. But I think this forum provides an opportunity for these African presidential foundations to begin to explore networking and other kinds of collaboration that will enhance mutually the work that we do. So I think the idea of that connecting to the AU could be an interesting one. But again, don't forget that some of these foundations are very risky, and therefore it's important we establish ourselves, we root ourselves before we embark on Pan-African and other kinds of important assignments. So I do recognize that, and I think something we have.
One of the good things about working with these foundations, you are able to be closer to the presidency and be able to provide advice. What has happened in the continent, the Africa Forum, which is the forum of former presidents, is the one that has actually taken up that task to be able to deal directly with the AU and with other recalcitrant presidents. I mean, we've got a crisis in Cameroon as we speak. President Paul Biya spends 7 of the months of a year in Geneva, and the country is in crisis. There's a huge fight between the so-called Anglophone Cameroon and then the Francophone Cameroon. And we've been trying to track him down, literally. And it's been possible to do that because we're saying to President Chisano is the chairperson of the Africa Forum. These former heads of state And African Forum is by invitation. It's by invitation because you need to avoid this thing that there are some guys that today are wearing a military uniform, tomorrow they just put a suit and say, I'm a president. Whereas the mind is still that of a soldier. So you need to give yourself the opportunity to invite correct persons. So I think as things progress, it becomes quite clear that these leaders as a collective, they should be able to make the interventions. And there's been a number of interventions that are being made. And secondly, my brother, with the issue of intellectuals, I think the issue that you are raising is the issue that was raised in Senegal last year in December at the Codestria conference, which is the conference of the intellectuals in the continent. But you're quite right, I think we need to do that. We need to revisit the unfinished program of the 1945 Pan-African Congress in Manchester. Have we solved the political problem? Have we solved the economic problem? Have we solved the spiritual problem in Africa? Those are the issues that were dealt with in that conference. And I'm not sure if we have solved those things. And I think you're quite right, then we have to revisit these things and be able to deal with that. But as far as this issue, my sister, about being poor or not, it's not literally in the bank sense. Take myself, for example, and maybe let me brag. So I've been running my own business for more than 23 years. Don't worry about how I look. But I find it untenable that a person like President Mbeki will not have support from the professionals. And for them to support him, they will need money. And I'm saying I will lead by example, leave my own business, leave this thing of trying to make money because I'm not sure whether I'm making it or not making it, whether I've got it or not, it's making no difference. But working in an environment like this, walking on the footsteps of somebody that has served humanity, it's actually much more fulfilling than the dividends that have been declared by my company on continuous basis. And I think that's what this continent requires. It's then been able for me to say, for instance, as we're working on this library project, I'm able to speak to other professionals, and I'm saying to them, I don't say them turn left whilst I'm turning right. I'm saying, look at me. You come and offer your skills, offer your expertise, and there's been many of those Africans that have offered their skills and expertise, and they're making our work possible. There's even been companies that will second their people to our project. So there is that goodwill amongst many of our people that is there. So it's important for us because we are focusing not on being rich in financial terms, but being rich intellectually and also on the impact.
Yeah, my name is Mugisha Abbas. I come from Uganda. What is the role of the foundation in helping these presidents who have overstayed in power to be embarrassed? I come from a country where my president has ruled 33 years. He has seen the great Mandela come and go. He has seen Thabo Mbeki. He has seen Zuma. He is now with his in-law Raphael. So how do you help such people from being embarrassed? Because when they overstay, a wind comes like what happened in Sudan. So I think you need to help these presidents, those who have overstayed in power, to always have time to live peacefully before being pushed out. Thank you.
I'm pleased Senghor turned over his 1 million, and since Daffour is not here, I can say that when Kufuor retired, there was a sense in which people thought he would get the Mo Ibrahim Prize. It did not happen, but it also raises for me the implications of one individual of high net worth being the one who puts the stamp of approval of legitimate or good leadership on African presidents, but also being aware that it could have been the difference for the financial status of Kufuor's foundation today. So I'm a little ambivalent about that, and I would value your response or your thoughts. Second, there are two foundations here. Thabo Mbeki is still alive. Senghor has moved on. The question was raised about when presidents and their relatives are active in the life of a foundation. In the case of Senghor, it may be very different. But can both of you provide some perspectives on what it looks like when the president is around and when the president is gone, and maybe we'll see which state is better.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. And Raphael, I'll let you start and next week.
Let me just answer the question about Uganda. Maybe we must remind President Museveni about his own statement in 1983, when he says there must be no leader in Africa that is allowed to stay beyond the 2 terms in office. I think he has completely forgotten about that. And the painful thing that worries me is the fact that we went to do some form of assessment of young people politically in Uganda last year. And I ran a number of workshops, believe it or not. And it was very terrible for me to hear when I said, what is the biggest problem that is stopping you from doing what the other Arab Spring young people have done? And they said, the biggest fear we have here is witchcraft. These are university people. And so then I was very shocked. And they said, no, but you can be shocked, but the 2 leading advisors of the president are, in our language, we call it sangomas, are witch doctors. So there is certain level there of the need of the people themselves, like they did in Sudan and in these other countries. So the idea that some people, the point that we've been told so many times about Zimbabwe, that we must send over the army to remove President Mugabe. President Mugabe is presiding over people. And I think if those people are tired of him, they must get onto the street and get rid of him. And it's the same thing in Uganda. The people of Uganda needs to stand up. And they will be supported like the protesters in Sudan today are being supported. So there's no other head of state that is going to go and tell President Museveni to get out of power. He enjoys that power. So I think it depends on the citizens to be able to deal with that situation, and it's a Uganda problem. And we can support the Uganda people, but we can't take over from that. Then the issue about the involvement of families in the foundations, I hear that there's apparently it's a huge problem. And I'm fortunate where I am because President Mbeki knows that he became a president not because he was elected by his family. He became a president because he was elected by the rest of the people of South Africa and embraced by the rest of the people of the continent. So the respect is to the people of South Africa and to the people of the continent. So the family has got nothing to do with what we're doing as a foundation. In actual fact, most family members, when they want to see him, they go through me. So it makes things much better, rather than this one dragging things this other side. He was not a family of Mbeki. He was not a president of the Mbeki family. He was the president of this country and the leader of the AU. So that's where we stand in our foundation, and it makes things much easier to do that. And then one of the young persons from our office is here. Part of his task is we've conducted most of the president's foundations in the continent, and we will be convening them in October. And the reason we had to convene them in October is actually to look at our respective programs and say, how do we combine our efforts in some of these programs? I mean, for instance, we have been asked from here to intervene in Guinea. So it's very difficult to come from here to go all the way to Guinea, but if we've got another foundation we're working with closer in the area, we will be able to do a number of things in the continent that we're doing. So President Meles' foundation from Ethiopia and ourselves are coordinating that meeting in October for us to be able to do these things. So, but in the end, really, friends, colleagues, is to say we are available to discuss partnerships. I think the journey towards an Africa reborn is a very long journey, but sometimes it can be a very, very lonely journey. So we need people along with us. Thank you very much.